The champagne glass slipped slightly in Zara Monroe's hand. Not enough to fall. Not enough for anyone around her to notice. Just enough for her to realize that her fingers had suddenly forgotten how to hold something steady. Across the grand ballroom of the Blackstone Imperial Hotel, the man she had loved for 4 years was kissing another woman. Not a misunderstanding. Not a drunken mistake. Not a moment of weakness he would later regret. He was smiling while doing it. The same warm smile he used to give Zara every morning when she woke up before sunrise to prepare breakfast before rushing to a 12-hour shift. The same smile he gave her when she handed him money she had secretly saved, because he could not afford his rent after losing his first job. The same smile he wore when he pulled her into his arms and whispered, "Just stay with me a little longer. When I finally make it, everything I have will belong to us." For years. For birthdays spent choosing gifts she could barely afford. For Christmases where she told herself his empty promises were simply delayed dreams. For years of being his emotional shelter while no one asked, who protected her when she became tired. She gave him patience when he gave her uncertainty. She gave him understanding when he gave her excuses. She made herself smaller so his ambitions could have room to grow. And somehow, she was the only person in the room who did not know she had already been replaced. The crystal chandeliers above the ballroom sparkled like a sky full of cold stars. Elegant music floated through the air. Wealthy executives laughed with glasses of expensive wine in their hands. Photographers moved between groups of powerful people, capturing moments that would appear in business magazines by morning. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration for the newest partner of Halcyon Media, Marcus Ellington. Her Marcus. At least, the man she thought she knew. She remembered the nights he sat at their tiny kitchen table frustrated and defeated because executives ignored his ideas. She remembered taking his unfinished presentations after he fell asleep, and staying awake until 3 in the morning fixing every slide because she wanted him to shine. She remembered telling him not to quit when he received his 3rd rejection, and locked himself in their apartment for days. "They are making a mistake," she had told him while sitting beside him on the floor. "One day they'll realize your value." She had believed those words more than he did. She had carried his confidence when he had none left. Tonight was supposed to be the night he looked at her in front of everyone and said, she was there when nobody else was. That morning he had smiled while adjusting his tie and said, "Wear that blue dress I love, Zara. Tonight I want everyone to see the woman who stood beside me from the beginning." So she wore the dress. The one that hugged her beautiful curves and made her feel elegant despite all the time society had tried to convince her she needed to become smaller to be worthy of being admired. She carefully styled her hair. She spent nearly an hour deciding whether to wear the necklace her late mother had given her. The necklace she only wore on the days that mattered most. She chose it because she thought this would be a memory she wanted to carry forever. She was right. Just not for the reason she expected. The sound of applause pulled her back to reality. Marcus stepped onto the stage with another woman holding his hand. A woman Zara had never seen before. Victoria Lang. Beautiful. Wealthy. The daughter of one of the most influential investors in the city. The type of woman whose last name opened doors before she even introduced herself. Marcus looked happier standing beside her than he had looked with Zara in months. That realization hurt more than she wanted to admit. The microphone made a soft noise as Marcus adjusted it. He laughed casually. "Sorry, everyone." The room laughed with him. Victoria leaned closer to him, her fingers resting comfortably on his expensive suit jacket. A suit Zara had bought him with money from her savings because she wanted him to look successful before he actually became successful. "Tonight is not only a celebration of a new chapter in my career," Marcus announced. "It's also the beginning of a new chapter in my personal life." Zara's heartbeat slowed. A strange thing happened when pain became too great. The crying disappeared. The anger disappeared. Everything became frighteningly quiet. Victoria lifted her left hand. A massive diamond ring reflected the chandelier lights. The room exploded with applause. Zara stopped breathing for a second. She knew that ring. She knew every tiny detail of it. 2 months earlier, Marcus had taken her to a luxury jewelry store. He told her it was for a business investment and asked for her opinion because she had perfect taste. She spent an hour comparing designs with him. She remembered choosing the exact diamond because she thought it looked timeless. She remembered laughing when he said, "You know me better than anyone." She smiled at the memory then. Now it felt like a knife turning inside her chest. He did know her better than anyone. He knew exactly what kind of ring she would love. He simply chose to place it on someone else's finger. Around her, whispers started to rise. She's beautiful. Marcus really moved up in the world. Well, when men reach a certain level, they need a woman who matches the image. Small laughter followed. They did not whisper because they were trying to protect Zara. They whispered because they did not even consider her important enough to hide their cruelty. Zara inhaled slowly. Her chest felt heavy. Her eyes burned. But she would not cry. Not here. Not where Marcus could watch the woman who built him fall apart, because he finally had enough money to replace her. She turned toward the exit. Zara. His voice stopped her immediately. The room became silent. Of course, he could not simply break her heart privately. He needed to control how everyone saw the ending. Slowly she turned around. Marcus walked toward her with the confidence of a man who believed he had already decided what the truth would be. Victoria followed behind him, curious and slightly amused. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked quietly. Zara looked around the room filled with people pretending not to listen. "You think now is the right time for a conversation?" His expression changed slightly. She knew that expression. She had seen it countless times. The look he gave her whenever she became an inconvenience. "Don't make a scene, Zara." Those words cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Make a scene." Her voice was calm. Too calm. The type of calm that existed only after something inside a person had already broken. "You invite me here. You tell me to wear the dress you love. You let me stand in this room while you announce your engagement to another woman. And your concern is me making a scene." Several guests lowered their eyes. Some looked uncomfortable. Not because they felt sorry for her. Because she had forced them to acknowledge something they wanted to ignore. Marcus noticed the shift in the room. His jaw tightened. "This is exactly what I mean," he said. Zara stared at him. "What exactly do you mean?" "You're emotional." The word landed harder than a slap. For years. For years of sacrifice reduced to a flaw in her character. "Victoria understands the future I'm trying to build," he continued. There it was. The truth he had been too cowardly to admit. It was never about love disappearing. It was about status. It was about deciding that the woman who supported him when he had nothing no longer looked like the woman he wanted beside him now that he had everything. Zara looked at him for a long time. She studied his face as though she was looking at a stranger wearing the features of someone she once loved. Then she smiled. Not because she was happy. Because sometimes heartbreak was so cruel that laughter became the only thing standing between a person and complete destruction. "I understand," she whispered. "Zara?" No, for the first time in 4 years she interrupted him. He looked surprised. He was not used to her choosing herself. "Let me ask one question." Her eyes moved to Victoria. "Did you know about me?" Victoria lifted her chin proudly. "Marcus told me your relationship was complicated." Zara nodded slowly. Complicated. Such a beautiful word people used when they did not have enough courage to say cruel. She looked back at Marcus. "And what am I now?" He looked uncomfortable. "Don't do this." "What am I now, Marcus?" A long silence passed. Too long. The answer appeared in his eyes before it left his mouth. Then he said the words that destroyed every memory she had spent years protecting. "You were what I needed at the time." Silence filled the ballroom. The music seemed to disappear. Even the air felt heavier. For years of loving him. For years of choosing him. For years of carrying him. Reduced to a temporary necessity. A stepping stone he used until he found a door to a different world. Zara felt something inside her finally let go. Not her dignity. Not her strength. The illusion of who she thought he was. The man she loved would never have spoken to her like that. Which meant the man she loved had never truly existed. She reached up and touched the necklace her mother gave her. Her fingers rested against the small pendant. Her mother had once told her, "Never beg someone to see your value, Zara. The right person will notice what others ignore." At the time she was too young to understand. Tonight she finally did. She had survived losing her mother. She had survived being alone. She would survive losing a man who never deserved the parts of her she gave away. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the grand entrance. Every step felt like walking through fire, but she refused to look back. Then a deep voice interrupted the silence. Interesting. Just one word. Calm. Controlled. Powerful. The entire room changed. Executives who had been whispering straightened their backs. Investors stopped talking. Even Marcus lost the confidence that had protected him all evening. Zara slowly turned around. At the entrance stood a Korean man wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. There was no dramatic display.
No laudanunciament.
No need for one. His presence alone commanded the attention of everyone around him. His face was handsome in a way that was almost intimidating. Sharp features. Dark, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. A man who carried the quiet confidence of someone who had never needed to raise his voice to prove his power. Kang Jae-hyun, the billionaire owner of the Blackstone Imperial Hotel Group. A man known for building a global empire before the age of 40. A man feared in business because he could destroy a company with a single decision. A man who rarely attended public celebrations unless he had a reason. Yet at that moment his eyes were not on Marcus. They were not on Victoria. They were not on the investors desperate for his attention. They were only on Zara. As though she was the only person he had noticed all night. He walked forward slowly. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the silent ballroom. He stopped beside her. His expression remained unreadable. Then he looked directly at Marcus and said, "I wonder how long a man has to be blind before he mistakes a woman like her for something temporary." The room froze. Marcus's face lost all color. Victoria's confident smile disappeared. Nobody had ever spoken to Marcus that way since his rise to power. Nobody except the one man who could take everything away from him with a single phone call. Zara looked at the stranger who had defended her without knowing her story, without knowing her name, without asking for anything in return. And for the first time that entire night she felt seen. But what she did not know was that Kang Jae-hyun was not defending a stranger. He had recognized her the moment she walked into the ballroom. Because months ago, during one of the darkest moments of his life, Zara Monroe had done something for him that nobody else had ever done. She had treated him like he was simply a man and not the billionaire everyone feared. And from that day forward, Kang Jae-hyun had never forgotten her face. The entire ballroom remained frozen for several seconds after Kang Jae-hyun spoke. No one moved. No one dared to interrupt the silence he had created. It was a strange thing to watch a room full of powerful people suddenly become afraid of saying the wrong word. But that was the effect Jae-hyun had on people. He did not need to threaten anyone. He did not need to raise his voice. His reputation walked into every room before he did. And tonight, his attention was resting on a woman everyone else had just treated as if she was invisible. Zara Monroe stood completely still. Her fingers tightened around the small necklace hanging from her hand. Her mother's necklace. The only thing keeping her grounded after the worst betrayal of her life. She should have felt relieved. She should have been grateful that someone had finally spoken for her. But what she felt most was confusion. Why? Why would the most powerful man in the room care? Why would a billionaire she had never met look at her like he had known her for years? Marcus recovered first. People like Marcus always did. Men who spent years learning how to impress others were experts at pretending they were never embarrassed. A small nervous laugh escaped him. "Mr. Kang," he said, quickly straightening his jacket. "I think there has been a misunderstanding." Jae-hyun did not respond immediately. That was another thing people noticed about him. He was never in a hurry to speak. He allowed silence to do what anger could not. His dark eyes stayed on Marcus for several seconds, long enough for the confidence in Marcus's expression to begin disappearing again. Finally, Jae-hyun asked quietly, "What part was misunderstood?" Marcus swallowed. The room listened. Every executive, every investor, every employee. They all knew they were witnessing something that would be discussed for months. Marcus forced a smile. "Zara and I had problems for a long time. We were already moving in different directions. Victoria and I simply connected at the right time." A lie wrapped in elegant words. Jae-hyun's expression did not change. Interesting. The same word. The same calm voice. Yet somehow it sounded much colder this time. "Your version of loyalty appears very flexible, Mr. Ellington." A few people looked away to hide their reactions. Nobody laughed. Nobody wanted to be seen enjoying the humiliation of a man who was still powerful. But everyone understood what Jae-hyun meant. Marcus felt it. the embarrassment, the loss of control. His eyes shifted toward Zara. For the first time that night, there was irritation in his expression. Not regret. Not guilt. Irritation. As though her remaining dignified was somehow causing him trouble. Zara, he said through clenched teeth, tell him we already discussed this. Her heart squeezed. Even now. Even after everything. He expected her to protect him. The same way she always had. She remembered every moment she defended him when his friends mocked his ambitions. Every time she lied to her own family and told them Marcus was trying his best. Every time she said, he's under pressure. He doesn't mean it. She had spent years translating his selfishness into something softer. No more. She looked at him calmly. No. That single word struck harder than any argument. Marcus blinked. What? I said no. The woman who had spent years choosing peace over confrontation looked directly into his eyes. You made your choices, Marcus. Stand beside them. A few people exchanged surprised looks. They were seeing a version of Zara that Marcus had never allowed anyone to notice. Not broken. Not desperate. Strong. His expression hardened. Don't act like you're innocent. The words made the room tense again. Victoria touched his arm. Marcus, maybe we should leave this. But his pride was injured. An injured pride was dangerous. You knew I wanted more from life. Zara laughed quietly. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone realizing the person in front of her had never truly listened. No, Marcus. Her voice was soft. You wanted more status. His jaw tightened. There's nothing wrong with wanting success. I never said there was. She stepped closer. I helped you achieve it. The words landed harder than anger. Because they were true. You wanted expensive suits. She looked at his jacket. I bought them. His eyes moved away. You wanted connections. Her voice remained calm. I introduced you to people I knew. His face became more uncomfortable. You wanted someone who believed in you before anyone else did. A painful smile touched her lips. You had me. The ballroom was silent. Even Victoria's confident expression faded slightly. For the first time, she was seeing the woman whose place she had taken. Not a jealous ex. Not an obstacle. Person. A person who had loved deeply. And been discarded. Marcus looked away. Because the truth was much harder to argue against than anger. Jaehyun noticed everything. The slight trembling of Zara's fingers. The way she held her shoulders straight despite being exhausted. The way she never once insulted Victoria. The way she refused to beg. Exactly the same as before. His memory moved back 6 months. A rainy evening. A quiet street in Seoul during a business trip. A broken-down car. No security. No assistance. No one recognizing the billionaire sitting alone on the sidewalk after a terrible day. Everyone who passed looked at him with suspicion. Everyone except one woman carrying an umbrella. A curvy black woman who had approached him without hesitation. You look like you need this more than I do. She handed him her umbrella. He had looked at her surprised. Do you know who I am? She smiled. Should I? It was the first time in years someone had spoken to him without fear or interest. He had almost laughed. No. Good, she answered. Then I can be honest. She sat beside him under the rain. They spoke for 20 minutes. She listened. Not because she wanted something. Not because she knew his name. Because she noticed he looked lonely. When his driver finally arrived, he had turned to thank her. But she was already walking away. He never learned her name. Only her face. Only her kindness. For 6 months he searched quietly. A woman who expected nothing from him. A woman who saw a tired man before she saw power. And tonight, the moment Zara entered his hotel, he recognized her immediately. He had planned to introduce himself differently. Under better circumstances. Not while her heart was breaking in front of hundreds of people. But watching Marcus throw away a woman like her had awakened something inside him that he rarely allowed himself to feel. Anger. Not because Zara belonged to him. She did not. Not because he desired revenge. That was beneath him. But because he understood something Marcus did not. Some people entered your life once. And if you fail to recognize their value, you might spend the rest of your life regretting it. His attention returned to the present. Marcus noticed his gaze. A small fear entered his eyes. Mr. Kong, he said carefully, I hope this personal matter does not affect our business relationship. There it was. The real concern. Not Zara. Not the humiliation. Business. Jaehyun took another slow step forward. The entire room became even quieter. I have no interest in your personal relationships, Mr. Ellington. Marcus released a small breath of relief. Until Jaehyun continued. However, I am very interested in character. The relief vanished. And a person's character is most visible when they no longer need someone. Marcus had no response. For the first time in years, someone had measured him not by his wealth, his title, or his success, but by how he treated the person who helped him reach that success. And he failed. Jaehyun turned away from him. His eyes softened slightly as he looked at Zara. A change so small most people missed it. But Zara noticed. For a man whose face revealed almost nothing, that tiny softness felt surprisingly intimate. You should leave, he said quietly. She frowned. The words were not a command. They sounded like concern. You've endured enough attention for one night. Something about the way he said it almost broke her composure. Because everyone else had been focused on the spectacle, the embarrassment, the gossip. He was the first person to consider how tired she must be. She looked away. Her eyes burned. No. Not here. She would not cry. Not even in front of a man who had shown her kindness. Thank you, she whispered. His expression remained calm, but his eyes held something she could not understand. Recognition. Respect. Perhaps something even more dangerous. Before she could ask how he knew her, his assistant suddenly entered the ballroom with a worried expression. Chairman Kong. Jaehyun looked at him. What is it? The assistant lowered his voice. There is a problem with the acquisition documents. Jaehyun's expression became unreadable again. Handle it. I would, sir, but the issue involves a signature from Ms. Zara Monroe. The room froze. Zara's eyes widened. Marcus turned toward her in disbelief. How does a billion-dollar acquisition involve you? Jaehyun slowly looked back at Zara. And for the first time that evening, a faint smile appeared on his face. The kind of smile that carried a secret. Because Ms. Monroe, he said quietly, you have no idea how important you are. And suddenly, the entire room realized the woman they had spent the night looking down on was connected to Kong Jaehyun's empire in a way nobody expected. Zara Monroe did not move. For several seconds, she simply stared at Kong Jaehyun, as if she had misunderstood what he had just said. The ballroom around them had become nothing more than distant noise. Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on her, but she could barely feel their presence. A few minutes ago, those same people had watched her be discarded like a chapter someone wanted to erase. Now they were looking at her as though they had missed an important detail in a story they thought they understood. That was the thing about people. They only looked closer after someone powerful told them something was worth seeing. It was a lesson Zara had learned far too many times in her life. Her beauty had always been questioned by people who measured women with narrow standards. Her kindness had been mistaken for weakness. Her patience had been mistaken for lack of options. Her silence had been interpreted as acceptance. They never understood that some women remain gentle not because they were powerless, but because they chose not to become cruel after the world had been cruel to them. Zara swallowed slowly and looked directly at Jaehyun. What do you mean? Her voice was calm, but inside, her heart was searching for answers. Jaehyun studied her for a moment. The same way he had 6 months earlier in the rain. The same way he had watched her tonight when she refused to beg a man who did not deserve her tears. She still did not recognize him. Somehow that made him respect her even more. Every person who entered his life remembered his name, his company, his wealth, his influence. But the woman who had given him kindness on one of the worst days of his life remembered none of it because she had never cared who he was. His assistant stood quietly beside him, waiting for permission to explain. Jaehyun gave a small nod. Tell her. The assistant stepped forward carefully. Ms. Monroe, 6 months ago, our company began developing a global cultural initiative called the Horizon Project. It focuses on creating opportunities for independent artists, designers, and small entrepreneurs who have been overlooked by larger corporations. Zara listened silently. The name sounded familiar, but she could not understand how she was connected to something on that level. The assistant continued. Before the project was approved, Chairman Kong requested that we collect anonymous stories and proposals from ordinary citizens around the world. He wanted to understand what people actually needed, rather than what executives assumed they needed. Jae-hyun looked away briefly, remembering the argument he had with his board. They wanted statistics, numbers, predictions. He wanted humanity. They called it emotional decision-making. He called it listening. Out of more than 40,000 submissions, the assistant said, one proposal changed the direction of the entire project. Zara's expression slowly shifted. A memory appeared in her mind. A cold winter evening. Her tiny apartment. Marcus sleeping peacefully after another exhausting day of complaining about how unfair life was. She had been sitting at their old kitchen table with her laptop open. She had seen an online competition asking people to submit ideas for helping overlooked communities. She spent the entire night writing about talented people who were ignored because they lacked money, connections, or the right appearance. She wrote about women who were told they needed to change themselves to become valuable. She wrote about creators who abandoned their dreams because nobody gave them a chance. She never expected anyone to read it. She submitted it and forgot about it by morning. "No," she whispered. The assistant gave a respectful smile. "Yes, Ms. Monroe. Your proposal became the foundation of the Horizon Project." The entire ballroom became even quieter. Marcus stared at her as though he had never seen her before. The woman he spent years treating as someone who belonged behind him had just been revealed as the mind behind one of the largest humanitarian investments in modern business. The irony was almost painful. He remembered every time Zara talked passionately about helping others. Every time she stayed up late writing ideas. Every time he dismissed it as a hobby. "You spend too much time thinking about people who can't help you," he once told her. She had smiled and replied, "Maybe helping someone should be enough reason." He remembered that moment now with a bitterness he could not explain. Because the very compassion he considered foolish had earned the respect of the man whose approval he desperately needed. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus asked before he could stop himself. Zara slowly turned toward him. The question was almost amusing. For years together, and this was the first time he wanted to know what she had created. "When would I have told you, Marcus?" she asked quietly. The words hit him harder than anger. "Between the moments you were talking about yourself? Between the nights I was editing your presentations while my own work remained unfinished." His mouth opened but no words came out. She continued softly, "You were so focused on becoming someone important that you never asked who I already was." The room fell into a heavy silence. Even Victoria looked uncomfortable. She had expected jealousy, anger, and desperation from Zara. Instead, she was watching a woman reclaim herself without raising her voice. Jae-hyun noticed everything. The way Zara refused to humiliate Marcus despite having every reason to. The way she spoke with honesty rather than cruelty. It was the same kindness that frustrated him 6 months ago when she gave him her umbrella. "You should be more careful," he had told her that night. "The world takes advantage of people like you." She had smiled under the rain. "People always say that. And they are usually right." "Maybe," she replied. "But I'd rather be hurt for being kind than become someone who only knows how to protect themselves." He had thought about those words many times afterward. More than he wanted to admit. More than was reasonable for a woman whose name he did not even know. Now, standing a few feet away from her, he realized something unexpected. The woman he searched for was even stronger than the memory he carried. Chairman Kong, one of the executives, suddenly interrupted, breaking the emotional tension in the room. "Are you saying Ms. Monroe will be involved with the Horizon Project?" Before Jae-hyun could answer, another voice entered the conversation. "That won't be necessary." Everyone turned. Marcus stepped forward. His expression was controlled, but there was desperation hidden underneath. The same man who had publicly thrown Zara away was now looking at her, as if she was something valuable again. Jae-hyun noticed it immediately. His eyes became colder. Marcus looked at Zara. "You've always been talented." "I never denied that." A lie. Everyone in the room could hear it. Even he knew it. "We have a complicated history," Marcus continued. "Perhaps we should discuss everything privately and figure out where things went wrong." Victoria's head snapped toward him. "Marcus." He ignored her. His eyes remained on Zara. He was no longer looking at the woman who loved him. He was looking at the opportunity he had almost lost. And Jaehyun hated that he understood exactly what was happening. For years, people chased him because of what he could provide. For years, he questioned whether anyone saw the person behind the empire. That was why he remembered Zara. She was the only person who had looked at a lonely man sitting in the rain and asked if he was okay. Nothing more. Nothing less. His jaw tightened slightly, a tiny movement that nobody noticed except his assistant, who had worked beside him for 10 years. He had never seen his chairman become personally affected by anyone. Not like this. Not over a woman he barely knew. Jaehyun stepped forward. A simple movement, yet the atmosphere changed instantly. Marcus stopped speaking. "Mr. Ellington," Jaehyun said calmly, "I find your timing remarkable." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" Jaehyun's gaze remained unreadable. "You spent the entire evening convincing everyone she was someone you had outgrown." A pause. A dangerous silence. "And now that everyone knows her value, suddenly you wish to talk." Marcus's face tightened. "That's not what this is." Jaehyun took another step closer. "Then what is it?" No one breathed. No one moved. Because for the first time, the calm billionaire no longer looked indifferent. He looked protective. And that was far more frightening. Zara felt the shift too. It was subtle but unmistakable. A man who barely knew her was standing between her and another moment of humiliation. Something nobody had done before. Not her friends. Not her family. Not even herself sometimes. She looked at him carefully. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. For the first time that night, Kang Jaehyun had no immediate answer. Because the truth was dangerous. The truth was that he had spent 6 months searching for the woman who made him feel like he was not a title or a fortune. The truth was that seeing her hurt awakened a part of him he had buried long ago. The truth was that he was beginning to care. And caring had always been his greatest weakness. His eyes met hers. The room disappeared around them. Then his phone suddenly rang. His assistant looked down at the screen and his expression changed instantly. "Chairman Kang," he whispered. "It's from Seoul." Jaehyun's face became unreadable. "What happened?" The assistant hesitated. "Something he rarely did. It concerns your father." The warmth in Jaehyun's eyes vanished immediately. Zara noticed it. The walls around him returned in an instant. "What about him?" she asked softly before she could stop herself. The assistant looked between them nervously. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. "Chairman Kang, your father has demanded that you return to Seoul immediately." A pause. "He has chosen a woman for you to marry." Zara Monroe felt the words before she fully understood them. A woman chosen for him to marry. The sentence hung in the air like something too heavy for the ballroom to carry. Even Marcus forgot his own jealousy for a moment. Even Victoria stopped breathing properly. But Kang Jaehyun did not react immediately. His expression did not change. Only the temperature around him seemed to drop a few degrees. The assistant stood frozen, regretting that he had spoken out of turn. But there was no turning back now. Zara watched Jaehyun carefully, something tightening in her chest that she could not name. It was not pity. It was not curiosity. It was something more unsettling. Recognition of pressure. The kind of pressure she understood too well. Family expectations. Lives already planned without consent. Choices made for people who were powerful enough to be controlled by tradition. "Say that again," Jaehyun said quietly. The assistant swallowed. "Your father has arranged a marriage meeting in Seoul. He expects you to return immediately." A pause. "The woman is from the Han conglomerate family." The name meant something to everyone in the room. Another empire. Another alliance. Another transaction disguised as tradition. Marcus exhaled slightly, as if relieved that attention had shifted away from him. But Jaehyun's eyes did not move from Zara. That was what disturbed her most. Not the announcement. Not the expectation of marriage. The fact that he was still looking at her, as if she mattered in the middle of all of it. Zara looked away first. "You should go," she said quietly before she realized she had spoken. The words surprised even her. Why was she telling him that? Why did she care whether he stayed or left? Jaehyun turned his head slightly toward her. "You think I should? It sounds important." A pause. She added more softly, "Family obligations usually are." Something flickered in his eyes at that. Not agreement. Not disagreement. Understanding. The kind that came from experience. Yes, he said finally. They are. The room remained silent. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. If this affects your schedule with Halcyon Media, Jaehyun finally looked at him. Do not concern yourself with my schedule. The tone was calm, but final. Marcus immediately fell silent. Zara noticed something then. For all his power, Kang Jaehyun did not waste words. Every sentence had weight. Every silence had meaning. It reminded her of something she had forgotten about herself. She used to speak like that too. Before she learned to shrink her voice so others would feel comfortable. Before she learned that being soft made her easier to ignore. Jaehyun stepped slightly closer to Zara again. The Horizon project does not require your permission to proceed, he said. But it does require your presence if you choose to accept it. Zara blinked slowly. My presence? Yes. His eyes held hers. You created something that changes how we structure global funding for overlooked communities. That includes voices like yours being part of the decision-making process. Marcus let out a short laugh, but it sounded forced. That's ridiculous. She's not. Jaehyun's gaze shifted instantly. Marcus stopped speaking mid-sentence. It was not even a threat. It was simply attention from a man who had already decided someone was irrelevant. That was enough. Silence returned. Zara felt something unfamiliar rise inside her. Not pride exactly. Not yet. Something softer. Possibility. You read my proposal, she said slowly. Yes. You didn't know me. Noah paused. But I recognized you. The words made something in her chest tighten. Marcus looked between them. Confusion turning into irritation. This is absurd, he said. Zara, don't let him confuse you. You don't belong in corporate politics at this level. Zara slowly turned her head toward him. It was the first time that night she looked at him without emotion. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. Where do I belong then, Marcus? The question hit harder than any confrontation. He hesitated. That's not what I meant. It is, she said softly. You've always decided where I fit. Silence stretched between them. She continued, her voice steady. In your story I was support. In your success I was background. In your future I was temporary. Marcus's expression tightened. That's not fair. A faint smile touched her lips again. No, she agreed. It isn't. That simple agreement unsettled him more than resistance would have. Because she was no longer fighting to be understood by him. She was simply stating what she already knew. Jaehyun watched this exchange carefully. He had seen hundreds of corporate negotiations. He had seen people fight for money, power, reputation. But he had rarely seen someone reclaim themselves so quietly. Zara was not trying to destroy Marcus. She was simply stepping out of the version of herself he had written. And that was more powerful than revenge. The assistant cleared his throat cautiously. Chairman Kang, your flight to Seoul departs in 3 hours. Jaehyun did not look away from Zara. Cancel it. The assistant froze. Sir. Cancel it. A longer pause. Until further notice. The room reacted instantly. Even Marcus looked shocked.
Victoria frowned.
You can't just ignore your father's request, she said carefully, stepping forward. Jaehyun finally turned toward her. His expression remained calm, but distant. I can, he said simply. And that was the end of the conversation. Victoria stepped back unsettled. Zara felt the weight of that decision without fully understanding it. You are refusing a family arrangement, she asked quietly before she could stop herself. Jaehyun looked at her again. I am postponing it. Why? The question came out softer than she intended. Something in her tone made him pause slightly longer than usual. Around them, the room waited for answers they were not entitled to hear. Jaehyun finally said, because I do not make decisions while my attention is elsewhere. Zara felt that sentence differently than everyone else. Because it was not about business. It was not about power. It was about her. Marcus stepped forward again, frustration breaking through his control. This is unbelievable. You're letting her distract you from your responsibilities. Jaehyun looked at him slowly. She is not a distraction. The words were simple, but final. Marcus froze again. Zara felt her breath catch. Not because of what it implied, but because of how naturally he said it. Like it was already decided in his mind. Like it was obvious. Like she was not something temporary at all. Jaehyun stepped slightly closer to her. The distance between them reduced, but he still did not touch her. He was careful. Controlled. Ms. Monroe, he said quietly, you are not obligated to remain in this environment. Zara looked around the ballroom. The people who had laughed earlier were now silent. Watching. Judging differently now that power had shifted. Where would I go? She asked honestly. Jaehyun's gaze held hers. Anywhere you choose that is not defined by him. The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. Marcus laughed bitterly. You think she's going to just walk away and start over because you said a few inspirational sentences? Zara did not look at him this time. She looked at Jaehyun. Why are you helping me? She asked again. This time the question carried weight. Because she needed to know. Because she had learned that kindness without reason often came with hidden costs. Jaehyun was silent for a moment. For the first time he seemed to choose his words carefully. Because I remember you, he said. The room went still again. Zara frowned slightly. I don't remember meeting you. A faint shift in his expression. Almost imperceptible. You wouldn't. When? She asked softly. The ballroom faded again as he spoke. 6 months ago, he said. In Seoul.
Then.
A broken-down car. A man who had forgotten what silence felt like. Zara listened carefully, trying to place it. Then slowly, something stirred in her memory. A rainy night. A stranger sitting alone. A woman offering an umbrella without asking questions. Her eyes widened slightly. That was you, she whispered. Jaehyun nodded once. Yes. Marcus looked between them, confused and increasingly frustrated. What is this? Some kind of coincidence story. But neither of them heard him anymore. Zara felt something shift inside her chest. Not romance. Not yet. Something deeper. The realization that a moment she had forgotten had stayed alive in someone else's world. You never told me your name, she said softly. You never asked for it, he replied. That answer silenced her completely. Because it was true. She hadn't asked. She had simply seen a tired human being and treated him like one.
No expectations. No agenda.
Just kindness. Jaehyun studied her for a moment longer. Then he said something that changed the air again. Come with me. Zara blinked. What? Not as an obligation, he clarified. As a choice. Marcus immediately stepped forward. Absolutely not. Jaehyun finally turned toward him fully. The calm in his expression had not changed. But something colder had settled beneath it. You no longer have any authority over her decisions, he said quietly. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again. Nothing came out. Because for the first time he realized he truly had lost control of her story. Zara stood still, caught between everything she had known and everything she had never been allowed to imagine. Behind her, a life she had built through sacrifice was collapsing. Ahead of her, a man she barely knew was offering her something she had never been given before. Space to choose. And as Kang Jaehyun waited without pressure, without expectation, without demand, Zara Monroe realized the most dangerous thing about him was not his power. It was the fact that for the first time in years, she did not feel invisible in his presence. And that scared her more than the betrayal she had just survived. Zara Monroe did not move immediately after Kang Jaehyun said, Come with me. The words hung in the air like something too delicate to trust. Around them, the ballroom still felt frozen, as if everyone was waiting for her response to decide what version of reality they would believe next. Marcus stood a few steps away, his expression shifting between disbelief and irritation, like a man trying to regain control of a situation that had already slipped beyond his reach. Victoria no longer looked confident. She looked uncertain, watching a man she thought she understood act in ways she could not calculate. But Zara was not looking at either of them. She was looking at Jaehyun. Because something about him did not feel like pressure, did not feel like manipulation, felt like space. And that was unfamiliar, dangerous in its own quiet way. She took a slow breath. Where? She asked softly. Jaehyun did not answer immediately. His silence was not hesitation. It was consideration. As if he was deciding not just a location, but whether she was truly ready for the weight of what he was offering. Somewhere you can breathe, he said finally. Marcus scoffed sharply. This is insane. You're really going to walk away with him after everything? Zara finally turned her head toward Marcus. Not quickly. Not emotionally. Slowly. Like someone closing a book they had already finished reading. Everything, she repeated quietly. Marcus stepped closer. We had 4 years, Zara. A pause. You can't just erase that. Something flickered in her expression. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. I'm not erasing it, she said. I'm acknowledging it. The correction landed harder than any argument. Because it implied memory without attachment. Experience without denial. Truth without loyalty. Marcus's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Zara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, No, I already made the mistake. I just stayed in it too long. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the distant music in the ballroom felt irrelevant now. Jaehyun watched her carefully. Not like a man waiting for an answer. Like a man witnessing a decision forming in real time. Zara's fingers tightened around her mother's necklace again. The only piece of her life that still felt like it belonged entirely to her. Then she looked at Jaehyun. If I come with you, she said slowly, what am I agreeing to? That was the first question he had been waiting for. Not fear. Not rejection. Understanding. He took a small step closer, but still did not invade her space. You are not agreeing to anything permanent, he said. You are agreeing to distance. Zara studied him. Distance from what? From people who only see your value when it benefits them. The words were calm, but precise. Marcus flinched slightly, though he tried to hide it. Zara's eyes lowered for a second. She understood that kind of truth too well. She had lived it. She had survived it. And she was tired of it. Victoria finally spoke, her voice sharper now. This is ridiculous. You don't even know him properly. He could be controlling. You don't just walk away with a man like that. Zara turned toward her slowly. The first real attention she had given Victoria all night. A man like that, she repeated.
Victoria hesitated.
Zara continued quietly. You mean a man who didn't look away when I was being humiliated? A pause. Or a man who didn't reduce me to my relationship status before deciding whether I mattered? Victoria had no answer. Because anything she said would sound worse than silence. Zara nodded slightly, as if accepting that truth. Then she turned back to Marcus one last time. You said I was what you needed at the time, she reminded him softly. Marcus's expression shifted. Something between regret and frustration. Zara stepped forward half a step, closing the emotional distance she had kept for years without realizing it. I was never yours to use up, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried through the ballroom with unsettling clarity. I was someone who loved you when you had nothing to offer back. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time, he had nothing that could reshape her meaning. Zara stepped back again. That version of me is not available anymore. Then she turned away from him completely. Not in anger. Not in revenge. In finality. Jaehyun's assistant quietly approached again. Chairman Kong, security is prepared. We can leave immediately. Jaehyun did not look at him. Not yet. The assistant paused. Sir. Jaehyun's eyes remained on Zara. Wait. It was not a command for logistics. It was patience. For her. Zara noticed that too. Nobody had ever waited for her without expectation. It unsettled her more than anything else that night. She took one slow step toward him. Then another. The room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's voice broke behind her. Zara, don't do this. You'll regret it. She stopped. Not because he stopped her, but because she was choosing to acknowledge the last thread he was trying to pull. She did not turn around. I already know what staying feels like, she said softly. I don't need more of it to understand. Then she continued walking. Each step felt like detaching from a version of herself she had outgrown but been forced to carry. When she finally reached Jaehyun, she stopped a short distance away. He did not reach for her. He simply looked at her, as if confirming again that this was her decision. You don't have to decide everything tonight, he said quietly. Zara exhaled slowly. That's the first time someone has ever told me that. Something subtle shifted in his gaze. Not surprise. recognition of how heavy that statement was. He gave a small nod. Then don't decide everything, he said. Just decide this moment. Zara looked past him briefly at the life she was leaving behind. Marcus standing in silence.
Victoria, uncertain.
The crowd watching like spectators of a story they had not written but wanted to interpret. Then she looked back at Jaehyun. This moment, she repeated. A pause. I choose distance. Jaehyun nodded once. Understood. And with that single word, something irreversible settled into place. Not a contract. Not a promise. But alignment. He turned slightly. We are leaving. His assistant immediately moved. Security subtly adjusted positions. But before they could take more than a step, Marcus suddenly spoke again. You're really going to let her walk away like this? His voice was no longer controlled. It was breaking under frustration. Jaehyun stopped but did not turn fully. She is not being let to do anything, he said calmly. She is choosing. Marcus laughed bitterly. Choosing you. That made Jaehyun finally turn his head. His expression was unreadable again. But his voice dropped slightly. No, he said. She is choosing herself. The words landed harder than anything else that night. Zara felt them more than she heard them. For years, she had been told what she was choosing incorrectly. Now someone had reframed choice itself. Marcus stood still, unable to respond. Because there was nothing left to argue against that would not expose him further. Jaehyun extended his hand slightly toward Zara. Not grabbing. Not demanding. Simply offering direction. If you are ready, he said quietly. Zara looked at his hand. A simple gesture. But it did not feel simple. It felt like crossing into a different version of her life. One where she was no longer measured by what she tolerated. She hesitated for only a second. Then she placed her hand in his. And the moment their hands touched, something subtle shifted again in Jaehyun's expression. Not possession. Not control. Recognition deepening into certainty. Because now she had chosen to step forward. And Marcus Ellington, standing in the center of the ballroom that once celebrated him, realized too late that the woman he thought he had outgrown had just walked into a world where he would never be able to reach her again. Zara Monroe felt Kang Jaehyun's hand only for a second before she realized something unusual. He was not pulling her. Not dragging her. Not guiding her like someone who had already decided her direction. His hand was simply there, steady, waiting for her to move at her own pace. That difference mattered more than she expected. Behind them, the ballroom remained frozen in a strange state of disbelief. Marcus Ellington stood at the center of it all like a man watching his own life collapse in real time. Victoria no longer looked like a victory. She looked like a question he had not thought through. And the people who had once laughed at Zara now watched her leave in silence, as if afraid that acknowledging her departure too loudly would expose their earlier cruelty. Zara did not look back again. She could still feel the weight of Marcus's presence behind her, but it no longer anchored her. Simply existed, like something she had finally stopped carrying. As they walked through the corridor leading away from the ballroom, the noise of the event faded gradually. The music became distant. The laughter disappeared. Even the light seemed different here, softer, quieter. Jaehyun did not speak immediately. He seemed to understand something without needing to fill it with words. That silence again unsettled Zara in a different way. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. She finally broke it. Where are we going? Jaehyun answered without looking at her. Somewhere secure. Zara glanced at him. Secure from what? From people who will try to turn your life into a conversation again. She slowed slightly at that. The words were simple, but they carried something she recognized too well. Exposure. Misinterpretation. Control through attention. You think that will happen? She asked. Jaehyun finally looked at her then. It already is happening, he said. You just left the room before it could fully form. That made her pause. Because he was right. Even in the ballroom she had already felt it. The shift. The reevaluation. The way people's eyes were no longer just judging her, but recalculating her worth. She had lived long enough in environments where her value was constantly reassessed, depending on who stood beside her. Marcus had defined her in private. Society had defined her in silence. Now suddenly she was being redefined in public. And none of it felt like it belonged to her. They reached a private elevator. The doors opened immediately.
No hesitaste.
No waiting. As if the building itself recognized him, Zara hesitated for half a second before stepping inside. Jaehyun did not rush her. He entered after her, maintaining a respectful distance even in a confined space. The doors closed. The silence inside the elevator was heavier than the ballroom had been. Zara looked at her reflection in the polished surface of the doors. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her, not because she looked different, but because she felt different. Exhausted, not broken, just done with holding pieces that were never hers to carry alone. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Jaehyun turned slightly toward her. Do what? Step in. A pause. Defend me. He considered that for a moment. I didn't defend you, he said. Zara frowned slightly. You did. No, he replied calmly. I corrected a false interpretation. That distinction confused her. What's the difference? The elevator moved smoothly upward. Jaehyun's voice remained even. Defense implies you needed protection, he said. Correction implies they were wrong. Zara absorbed that slowly. No one had ever separated those ideas for her before. She had always been something that needed defending or ignoring, never simply misjudged. The elevator stopped. The doors opened into a quiet private floor that felt nothing like the chaos below. Minimal lighting, clean architecture, space that breathed. Zara stepped out slowly. The atmosphere here felt distant from the world she had just left. Controlled. Intentional. Jaehyun followed behind her. This is one of the private suites reserved for executive use, he said. You can stay here tonight if you want distance from everything outside. Zara turned to him. You're offering me a hotel room? A place to think, he corrected. She studied him carefully. You do this often? A faint pause. No, that answer was immediate. Honest. Zara noticed that too. Then why me? The question hung in the air longer than the others. Jaehyun did not answer right away. Instead, he walked a few steps toward the large window overlooking the city. Lights stretched endlessly across the horizon. 6 months ago, he said finally, I was in Seoul after a negotiation that failed. Zara listened quietly. I had no interest in being recognized, he continued. I was alone. It was raining. I stayed outside longer than I should have. A pause. Most people who passed by either avoided me or tried to approach me for something. He turned slightly toward her. You didn't. Zara's breath caught slightly. You were that man? Yes. Silence again. This time heavier. He continued. You gave me your umbrella and walked away without asking anything. Not my name. Not my story. Not even my condition. Zara looked away briefly, trying to recall it fully. A rainy night. A stranger. Tired eyes. She remembered kindness. Not identity. I didn't think it mattered who you were, she admitted softly. Jaehyun nodded once. Exactly. A pause. That is why I remembered you. Zara exhaled slowly. And now you appear in my life during the worst moment of it. Not the worst, he corrected gently. She looked at him again. It feels like it. A faint silence passed between them. Then he said something quieter. Sometimes endings feel like that before they become beginnings. Zara didn't respond immediately, because she wasn't sure she believed in beginnings anymore. Not in the romantic sense. Not in the hopeful sense people used in speeches. Beginnings had always come with expectations she eventually failed to meet. Your father, she said suddenly, changing direction. He wants you to marry someone. Jaehyun's expression did not change. Yes. And you just ignored that. For now. Zara studied him again. That sounds like something you can't ignore. It is something I can postpone, he said. There is a difference. She folded her arms slightly. And what happens when you can't postpone it anymore? A brief pause. Then I deal with it. Simple. Controlled. Unemotional. Yet not dismissive. Zara looked down at her hands for a moment. Your life sounds complicated too. A faint shift in his gaze. It is not complicated, he said. It is structured. That's another word for complicated, she replied softly. For the first time, something almost like a faint amusement touched his expression. Not a smile. Just recognition that she was not wrong. Zara walked slowly toward the window, looking down at the city below. So many lives happening at once. So many decisions being made that no one fully understood. I don't belong in your world, she said quietly. Jaehyun stepped beside her but still did not invade her space. Neither did I, he replied. That made her look at him. He continued. Until I built it. A pause. Belonging is not something you are given. It is something you define. Zara let that sink in. Sounded simple. But she knew nothing about her life had ever been simple. Marcus will try to contact me, she said suddenly. Jaehyun's tone remained calm. He already is. She frowned slightly. How do you know that? His assistant entered quietly at that moment, holding a phone. Miss Monroe, he said carefully. You have multiple missed calls and messages from Mr. Ellington. Zara looked at the phone for a moment, then away. She did not take it. Jaehyun observed her reaction carefully. No urgency. No hesitation to chase. Only distance. That mattered. Do you want them blocked? He asked. Zara shook her head slowly. No, a pause. I just don't want to answer them. That distinction was important. Jaehyun understood it immediately. The assistant waited for further instruction. Jaehyun spoke calmly. Ensure she is not disturbed tonight. The assistant nodded and left. Zara turned toward him slightly. You really just decided I'm staying here? I didn't decide, he corrected again. I offered. A pause. You accepted distance. This is part of that. Zara stared at him for a long moment. Then she said something softer. You don't feel like a stranger. Jaehyun did not respond immediately. Something subtle shifted in his expression again. But he said nothing. Because the truth was more dangerous than either of them had admitted. This was no longer about a hotel, or a project, or coincidence. It was about recognition that had started long before either of them understood it. And somewhere beneath the silence of that high-rise room, two lives that should never have crossed again had already begun to change direction without permission. Zara Monroe woke up the next morning in a silence she was not used to. Not the silence of loneliness but the silence of absence. The absence of noise, of judgment, of expectation pressing against her from every direction at once. For a moment she did not remember where she was. Then she saw the clean lines of the private suite, the soft morning light cutting across the floor-to-ceiling windows, and slowly everything returned. The ballroom, Marcus, Victoria, the ring, the humiliation, Kang Jaehyun. Her hand still remembered the feeling of his steady grip. Not controlling, not forcing, just present. She sat up slowly, her thoughts heavier than her body. A soft knock came at the door. She hesitated before answering. When she opened it, a staff member stood there respectfully holding a tray. Good morning, Ms. Monroe. Chairman Kang asked that you have breakfast prepared. He has already stepped out for a meeting. Zara blinked slightly. He asked. The staff member nodded. Yes. He said you should eat before making any decisions today. She stared at the tray as it was placed inside. Simple food. Nothing extravagant. Nothing performative. Just care. That word unsettled her more than she expected. Care had never been simple in her life. It had always come with conditions. She closed the door slowly after the staff left and sat by the window. Her phone lit up again. Marcus. Multiple messages. Missed calls. Then Victoria's name appeared once. Then disappeared. Then Marcus again. Zara did not open them. Not because she was afraid, but because she already knew the emotional weight they carried. Excuses. Justifications. Regret that only appeared when control was lost. A soft sound interrupted her thoughts. The door opened again. This time it was Kang Jaehyun. He did not enter fully. He paused at the threshold as if giving her the choice to allow him in. That detail mattered. Zara noticed it immediately. You didn't knock, she said quietly. I did, he replied. You didn't hear it. A faint silence passed between them. He stepped inside only after she did not object. Did you sleep? He asked. A little, she answered honestly. He observed her briefly. You didn't open your messages. It was not a question. Zara looked at her phone. Did you check? No, he said. But people like him don't stop easily. She exhaled slowly. I already know what he will say. Jaehyun nodded slightly. Then you also know what you will not respond to. That was true. It surprised her how accurately he understood silence. Not as avoidance, but as choice. He stepped closer to the window beside her. There is something you should know, he said after a moment. Zara looked at him. About what? My father's arrangement. Her expression tightened slightly. The marriage. Yes. A pause. It is not just tradition. Zara waited. He continued. It is leverage. That word changed the tone immediately. Leverage, she repeated. My father controls a portion of the company's legacy holdings. He believes alignment with the Han family will stabilize influence across regions. Zara frowned. So it is business. Everything in my world is business to someone, he said quietly. She studied him carefully. And you? A brief pause. Do you agree with it? He did not answer immediately. That silence itself was the answer. No, he said finally. But agreement is not always required for expectation. Zara looked away toward the city. That sounds exhausting. A faint shift in his expression. It is. Outside, the city was already moving. Cars, people, systems built on invisible structures of power and survival. She understood systems like that. Just not at this scale. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus again. Then a new message from an unknown number. We need to talk. I was wrong. Zara let out a quiet breath. Marcus's voice always came back when silence scared him more than pride. She turned the phone face down. Jaehyun noticed. He is persistent, he said. He is predictable, she corrected. That earned the faintest pause from him. Then something like approval, though he did not show it clearly. A moment later, his assistant entered again, tension visible in his posture. Chairman Kong, he said carefully. There is a situation outside the hotel. Jaehyun turned slightly. What kind of situation? The assistant hesitated. Mr. Ellington is here. Zara's breath stopped for half a second. Marcus had come. Jaehyun's expression did not change. Is he alone? No, the assistant replied. He is with several investors and media personnel. Zara immediately understood. Not apology. Not closure. Control. Marcus was not here to fix what he broke. He was here to reshape how it was seen. To reframe her exit into something digestible for public perception. Jaehyun looked at Zara. Do you want to see him? He asked simply. The question surprised her more than Marcus's arrival. Not because it was offered, but because it was optional. She stood slowly. Why would I? She asked. Jaehyun observed her carefully. Some people need closure to stop reopening wounds. Zara considered that, then shook her head. He does not deserve my closure. A pause. And I don't need his version of the ending. That was enough. Jaehyun turned slightly toward his assistant. Block access to this floor. The assistant nodded immediately and left. Zara watched him. You just shut him out. Yes. Without hesitation. Yes. A quiet beat passed. Is that how you handle everything? She asked. No, he said. Only things that are unnecessary. The simplicity of that answer unsettled her again. Downstairs, Marcus was already speaking to reporters, trying to shape a narrative before truth could settle. Zara and I are going through a transition, his voice likely said. There is no conflict. We respect each other deeply. Zara could almost hear it without hearing it. She had known him long enough to predict every softened lie he would use. Jaehyun's voice pulled her back. He is trying to control perception. Zara nodded slowly. He always does. A pause. It is easier for him when I am a misunderstanding instead of a decision. Jaehyun turned toward her slightly. And what are you? The question was not rhetorical. Zara looked at him. I am done being interpreted by him. Something shifted again in his expression. A quiet acknowledgement. Not of her pain, but of her clarity. Outside, flashes from cameras could be faintly seen through the lower windows. Marcus was performing again. Not love. Not loss. Image. Zara stepped closer to the glass. He thinks I will come down and fix this, she said softly. He thinks I will explain him to the world like I always did. Jaehyun stood beside her. Will you? Zara shook her head. No, that single word carried weight. Because it was not emotional. It was final. A short silence followed. Then Jaehyun spoke again. There is something else. Zara looked at him. More. My father, he said. He has already seen the footage from last night. Zara frowned slightly. Footage. Everything in the ballroom is recorded for security and documentation purposes. A pause. He has seen you. Zara felt a strange tension form in her chest. And Jaehyun's voice lowered slightly. And he is no longer interested in the arranged match. That surprised her. Because of me? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he said something more careful. Because of your presence. Zara looked down slightly. That doesn't sound like a compliment. It is not meant to be one, he said. It is meant to be reality. A silence followed. Outside, Marcus continued speaking. Inside, everything felt like it was shifting in ways neither of them fully controlled. Zara finally spoke again. So what happens now? Jaehyun looked at her for a long moment. Now people will try to define you faster than you can define yourself. A pause. And I will not allow that. Zara frowned slightly. Why do you care so much about that? This time he hesitated longer. Not because he did not know the answer, but because he did. Because I know what it feels like, he said quietly, to be seen only as a role in someone else's story. Zara studied him. For the first time, she saw something beneath his control. Not vulnerability exactly, but memory. Pain that had been disciplined into silence. Before she could respond, his assistant returned again, more urgently this time. Chairman Kong, he said, your father is on a private line. He insists on speaking to you immediately. Jaehyun did not move. His eyes remained on Zara for a brief second longer. Then he turned slightly. Tell him I will call back. The assistant hesitated. Sir, he said it is about Ms. Monroe. That changed the air instantly. Zara felt it. Jaehyun felt it. Even the silence in the room felt heavier. Slowly, Jaehyun turned his head toward the assistant. His voice dropped slightly. Then tell him, he said calmly. She is not a topic for negotiation. And in that moment, Zara realized something she had not expected. Marcus had tried to claim her in public. The world had tried to define her in silence. But the most powerful man she had ever met had just declared, without raising his voice, that she was not an object to be discussed. And somewhere outside the hotel, Marcus Ellington was still trying to rewrite a story that had already stopped belonging to him. Zara Monroe stood in silence as Kang Jaehyun's words settled into the room like something irreversible. She is not a topic for negotiation. There was no anger in his tone, no performance, no need for intimidation. It was simply a fact stated by a man who had never needed to repeat himself twice. And somehow, that made it more powerful than anything Marcus Ellington had ever said in his entire life. For a moment, Zara did not move. The weight of everything that had happened over the last 24 hours pressed against her chest in waves she could not fully name. Betrayal, exposure, public humiliation, then silence, then being seen, truly seen, not as someone's girlfriend, not as a replacement, not as an accessory to someone else's success, but as herself. Marcus was still downstairs trying to rewrite reality. Cameras, reporters, carefully shaped sentences designed to soften his abandonment of her into something acceptable. But none of that could reach her anymore. Because she was no longer inside that story. She finally exhaled slowly. He is not going to stop, she said quietly. Jaehyun stood beside her, calm as always. No, he replied. He will not. Zara looked at him. So what happens now? A pause. Not from uncertainty, from precision. Now, he said, you decide whether you want to remain someone he can still reach. That sentence hit deeper than expected. Not because it was dramatic, because it was simple. Zara turned toward the glass again. Below them, the world still believed Marcus Ellington was in control of the narrative. But she could already feel that control slipping. Not because of scandal, because she was no longer participating in it. I don't want him in my life anymore, she said softly. The words were not emotional. They were clean, final. Jaehyun nodded once. Then it ends. Zara let out a faint breath. It doesn't feel that simple. It rarely does, he agreed. A short silence followed. Then footsteps echoed outside the suite. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Controlled. Jaehyun's assistant entered with a serious expression. Chairman Kong, he said. Your father has arrived at the hotel. The air shifted immediately. Even Zara felt it. He is here. Jaehyun asked calmly. Yes, sir. He is requesting immediate access to this floor. Zara turned slightly toward him. Your father came here? He does not travel for nothing, Jaehyun replied. That answer alone told her everything she needed to know about the kind of man his father was. The assistant hesitated. He is also requesting to meet Ms. Monroe. Zara blinked once. Me. Jaehyun's expression did not change. But something in his eyes hardened slightly. Did he say why? The assistant lowered his voice. He said the situation has become personally relevant. Zara felt a quiet tension rise in her chest. Personally relevant. That phrase did not belong in a conversation about someone she had just met. Jaehyun turned slightly toward her. Stay here, he said. Zara frowned. I didn't agree to being hidden. This is not hiding, he said calmly. This is control of environment. She studied him. You're very good at that. A faint pause. I learned early, he replied. Before she could respond, the doors opened again. This time without permission. A man entered. Older. Sharply dressed. Authority without introduction. The resemblance to Jaehyun was undeniable. But where Jaehyun was quiet control, this man was structured dominance. Kang Min-suk. His father. He looked at the room once, then immediately at Zara. Not with curiosity. With evaluation. Like someone assessing a variable in a calculation. So this is her, he said. Zara did not look away. Jaehyun stepped slightly forward. You entered without invitation. Min-suk ignored him. You delayed your return because of this? Jaehyun's voice remained steady. I made a decision. His father finally looked at him directly. A decision influenced by emotion. The word was spoken like an accusation. Zara felt it immediately. Emotion was not respected here. It was treated as interference. Jaehyun's expression remained unchanged. She is not an influence, he said. Min-suk turned his attention back to Zara. You cause disruption in a business environment you do not belong to. Zara felt something shift inside her. That familiar pattern again. Being treated as an interruption in spaces she had not asked to enter. She stepped forward slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough to be seen. I didn't cause anything, she said calmly. I was present when people chose to expose their own behavior. Min-suk narrowed his eyes slightly. Interesting response. Zara held his gaze. It is not meant to be interesting. It is meant to be accurate. A silence followed. Jaehyun watched her carefully. Marcus had never heard her speak like this. Neither had anyone in that ballroom. Not until everything collapsed. Min-suk finally spoke again. Do you understand what people are saying about you right now? Zara nodded slightly. Yes. And do you understand what that means for my son? She paused. Then replied. I understand what people choose to say about things they don't fully understand. That answer made something flicker in Min-suk's expression. Not approval. Not disapproval. Assessment recalibrating. Jaehyun stepped closer to Zara again, subtly positioning himself between her and his father without making it obvious. She is not involved in your concerns, he said quietly. Min-suk's eyes narrowed slightly. She is now. A pause. Because you made her visible. That sentence carried weight. Zara felt it immediately. Visibility was not a gift in this world. It was exposure. Jaehyun's jaw tightened slightly. I did not make her anything, he said. She already was. Min-suk studied him for a long moment, then shifted his attention back to Zara. Do you know what my son is? He asked. Zara didn't respond immediately. A person, she said finally. That answer caused a brief silence in the room. Not because it was profound, but because it was unexpected. Min-suk exhaled slowly. He is not simply a person, he corrected. He is an obligation. Zara looked at Jaehyun. For the first time, she saw a slight tension in his expression that had not been there before. Not fear. Constraint. She understood that kind of weight. Marcus had carried it too in a smaller, less powerful form. Expectations. Definitions. Roles assigned before choice was allowed. Then maybe, Zara said quietly, that is the problem. Min-suk turned his attention fully to her. Explain. Zara hesitated only briefly, then spoke. When people are treated as obligations instead of individuals, they eventually stop existing as themselves. A pause. They become whatever others need them to be. The room went still. Even Jae-hyun did not interrupt. Min-suk looked at her for a long time, then asked, "And what do you think you are to my son?" The question hung in the air. Zara felt it before she answered it, because it was dangerous. Not emotionally. Structurally. "I am not anything to him," she said carefully. "I am someone he chose to speak to." Jae-hyun's gaze shifted slightly toward her at that sentence. Min-suk observed both of them now. Slowly. Calculating again. "That is not how the world will interpret it," he said. Zara nodded. The world rarely interprets things correctly the first time. A faint pause. Or the second. Silence again. Then Min-suk spoke to his son. "You will return to Seoul within the week." Jae-hyun did not respond immediately. "And if I don't?" Min-suk's tone hardened slightly. "Then you will lose control of things you have spent your life building." That was not a threat. It was a fact. Zara felt it clearly. Power always had structure, and structure always had cost. Jae-hyun looked at his father without blinking. "Then I will rebuild differently." That answer shifted the entire room. Min-suk studied him for a final moment, then looked at Zara once more. "You are either the most dangerous distraction he has ever encountered," he said slowly, "or the first thing that has ever made him question direction." Zara did not respond, because she didn't know which one it was yet. Min-suk turned and left without another word. The door closed behind him with finality. Silence returned. Zara exhaled slowly, only now realizing she had been holding her breath. "That was," she started. "Expected," Jae-hyun finished calmly. She looked at him. "Is this your normal life?" A faint pause. "It used to be," he said. That past tense mattered. Zara noticed it. Outside, somewhere far below, Marcus Ellington was still trying to control a story that no longer had its original subject inside it. But inside this room, something else was forming. Not romance. Not yet. Not certainty. But something quieter. A shared awareness that both of them had been defined too long by other people. Zara finally spoke. "I don't want to go back to who I was yesterday." Jae-hyun looked at her steadily. "Then don't." A pause. "Stay here long enough to decide who you become next." Zara looked out at the city again, then slowly nodded. Not because she trusted the future, but because for the first time she was not being pushed into it. And somewhere in the distance, Marcus finally realized that losing Zara Monroe was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of one he could no longer control.